Welcome into the Phoenix Downbeat. I'm Drew Kreisman, along with my brother Ira Kreisman. You know us as the Everything is Final Fantasy podcast, and we are joined once again. You're both very snotty, by the way. By our dear friend, if I may use a Final Fantasy phrase, from Airship Overdrive, it's Ryan Laney, everybody.
Woo! Good to be here.
I realized as I set that up, like, we needed an actual audience because otherwise the silence is like, that's not fun. But hey, on this episode, we're talking about two pieces of music, either Devil's Lab or the Magitek Research Facility and the Floating Continent from Final Fantasy VI. Why? Well, the easy answer, as has always been the case with Ironized, because that's what we wanted to do, and we make up nonsense rules. It's our shit, we all just decided. But we did give some thought to one thing. Was we really wanted to step into a new type of sound from Uematsu that we haven't really delved much into here. So that'll be one of our framing devices for these two pieces, very much in that industrial kind of, we'll ask Ryan about these terms as we go through, electronic, but with these natural elements that create a fun, weird, strange juxtaposition. We'll get into all that. But the other thing that I realized, for me personally especially, was I feel like when we talk about Uematsu music, a lot of times when we talk about his genius, there's an early one for you. Go ahead and take an early. Let's get you started early. We focus on the Libera Fatalis and the Dancing Mads and the One-Winged Angels, and as well they should. They take up a lot of space. They've earned that. Those are masterpieces. But I am always struck by his ability to have one piece of music that goes to one place, one small part of the game, and have it be extraordinarily incredible just for the sake of it, just because. Where I think in a lot of other games or movies or TV shows, scoring for some of these things you just go to something very simple, let the action on the screen do what it's going to do. Uematsu just goes hard 100% of the time. And I think these are two tracks that really show how incredible, like, he just never rests.
Yeah, these two tracks today, they show not only a really great example of something I'm going to talk about in a second here that I'm just going to call hyper programmatic music. I'll talk about that in a second. But it also, like Drew was just saying, it's showing his evolution from just kind of writing music for broad strokes purposes in games into these hyper specified, here's a song that you only hear in one area of the game, instead of just the generic, here's one overworld or here's one town theme like many other similar JRPGs have. And these two songs, for reasons we'll get into in a little bit here, are great examples of you only hear them in one location, and they're serving a very, very unique purpose as far as literally the sound of things you are hearing, not just the melody, not just how the parts interact, but things that sound like where you are. And I guess, do you guys want to discuss that kind of topic right now, or do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, I think with Ira and I especially, and we'll hear this too, we've always been fans of, tickled by the old hammer on anvil. And is that what it literally always is, or are there approximate? I mean, here it's probably a MIDI sound, but hammer on anvil, what is that? Why is that? And why is it so neat and fun and cool?
Let's ask Trent Reznor sometime. Sure. I seriously, I considered getting some like industrial rock stuff, but I'm pretty sure there'd be copyright strikes. Yeah. But there's just something about that heaviness to having that hammer on an anvil, that clanging, industrial, heavy reverberation in an empty warehouse kind of sound that just immediately tells you where you are. And it gives this really cool sense of like power or weight, more specifically, to what's going on, because you can't really drop a massive hammer on an anvil or drop like a giant metal, keg drum on the ground unless there's something powerful moving those things typically. And so by just simply having the effect of the loud metal on metal sounds in any kind of music, it instantly teleports you into a headspace of like, oh, I know where we are. And this is actually a good point. This is actually a good lead into a non-Uematsu song I was going to talk about today. Drew, if you don't mind, real quick, can you go to, it's Mystery Game Track 2. So this here is not an Uematsu song. This is actually by David Wise, another one of my favorite game composers that does really good use of the metal on metal sound to help transport you mentally somewhere, just based on the percussive noises alone. Are either of you Donkey Kong Country enjoyers?
It was never my most favoriteest back in the day, but I definitely enjoyed this game back in its time. It didn't stick with me as long as it has with other people, but yeah, this is a bit nostalgic. This is a fun trip down memory lane.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan, but I like it, and I especially like the music. And I like this for the reason we're talking about the Final Fantasy ones, is because it's a juxtaposition of environment, right? We start in the jungle, we start in a natural setting, and then we're in a mine, in a man-made or ape-made. I don't know who's mining in this particular world, but it becomes something that is more industrial.
Yeah, and immediately from the beginning, when we hear those drum parts, the first 4 or 8 measures is literally just that. But it's very metallic. My voice can't emulate it nearly as good as what it actually sounds like. But this is where that discussion point I mentioned earlier comes into play. We've talked about on the podcast before about what's called absolute music versus programmatic music. Absolute music, which, I mean, do either of you want to take the reins and tell us what the difference is?
Absolute music is music for the sake of music, whereas programmatic is for some sort of a storyline beat or a program-related thingy.
Perfect. There's something programmatic or thematic related to it. Absolute music is literally, like Ira just said, it's music for music's sake. If you look at the Well-Tempered Clavier book by Bach, that's a great example of it's just music that sounds really good. It's not about a person or a setting or a story or anything. It's just music. Then you get into programmatic music, which is designed to enhance a storyline, a character, a theme, a world of some kind, and it gives you that sense of where you are. A good example, actually, speaking of Final Fantasy VI music, is like Kefka's theme, where it kind of has this sort of creeping, mischievous sort of sound to it, which reflects the character Kefka really well. Now we're getting into what I'm going to call hyper programmatic music, which is where you're literally hearing the sounds that you would be hearing if you were in this environment in the real world. Because David Wise, in that last song from Donkey Kong Country 2, I think it's called Mining Melancholy, he could have written that song with just kind of a standard drum set, and it would have been just fine. Add in the synth parts, the extra parts as they come in, that little kind of harpsichordy type part. Nothing wrong with that. But instead of a drum set part, what did he use instead?
Metal.
Hanging on stuff.
Yeah, literal metal that sounds like someone is literally mining axe to rock in the background somewhere. And actually, Drew, if you don't mind, pull up. There's one more track that's a good segue into this. It's the one called Mystery Non-Game Track 1, I'm pretty sure. And this is a piece of music that I think actually either one or both of the Kreisman brothers here might have played when they were in band many moons ago. But this is one that it's my favorite composer of all time besides Uematsu, and it literally uses Anvil to hyper programmatically show something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we played that one.
Yeah.
And then we brought in the stuff, and it was right behind me. It was like right here.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what is that song?
The Blacksmith song.
Yeah, it's the Blacksmith song, Movement 3 from Holst's Second Suite in F, which he's a master composer. My favorite piece of all time is The Planet Suite by Gustav Holst, the same composer. And in this case, we have a literal anvil. And me being a percussionist by trade when I was in high school and in college, I have played this actual anvil part with a ball peen hammer on a literal anvil, sometimes on a break drum if we can't get an actual anvil in there. But it's a part that exactly like we discussed with the other one, it's literal metal on metal because they're playing a song that's sounding like an actual blacksmith's song. So of course, what's a blacksmith shop going to sound like?
Yeah. Like
metal on metal.
Metal on metal, yeah. So I think that's probably as good of a segue as we're going to get to then look into our actual songs today. Which one do you want to look at first?
I like that. It was a little appetizer, a little music before our music. I like that. Let's start with Magitek Research Facility because we're going to hear that hammer on anvil like right away. And so, I'm going to play the full loop on this one is actually just about a minute. So I'm going to play the first thing all the way through. We'll listen to it, even though I do think something that's interesting about both the pieces we're going to listen to today is they have a very pronounced like A and B section, both of them. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about that. But with Floating Continent, I want to listen to them separately and then together. For this, let's just go a minute long on one of my favorite just crunchy tunes to listen to from back in the day. Man, let's do it. It's the Magitek Research Facility.
Crunchy. Yeah, baby. Crunchy's the word there. It's just so like I can't think of a better word. It's just crunchy. You've got that really intense, almost like squishy sounding, like chains, clapping together sort of sound for like the quote unquote bass drum, and then a literal like pipe on pipe kind of sound. King, king.
Yeah.
It's so good. And then what's the actual like melody doing? Because there's a couple melodies kind of getting thrown back and forth. What's happening there?
Yeah. So one of them is like this electronic synth, right? That's going but there's they're like a trumpet. Is it a trumpet counter melody, or the trumpet comes in later? Maybe there's supposed to be like an electric guitar or something in the back. I don't know. I'd have to double check on the instrumentation of it, but the electronic synth is the one that always, of course, catches my mind because it's doing all kinds of swelling and growing and fading in and out that, when you're hearing these synthetic strings or trumpets, they don't often do that, and it doesn't sound quite as good. But with an electronic instrument, with something that's just a synthesizer, you can play with it and have some fun. And Uematsu was clearly having some fun with it.
And so to follow that up, I'll ask Ira this question. Why do you think Uematsu used the synth bass part and a background part I'm going to talk about here in a second, synth parts, but he also has these really beautiful flowing trumpets and string ensembles. Why do you think he married those two sounds together in this song? Which, by the way, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about a massive spoiler for the second half of Final Fantasy VI. So this is your warning.
Yeah, so this story is not quite the traditional nature versus industry, with nature good, industry bad, though it is a little bit. But there's plenty of industry in this story that is used to the betterment of the world and mankind, whereas I feel like in 5, it was a little more, hey, be careful. But also nature was the bad guy in 5 too, but we're not getting into that. Yeah, as an evil tree. So yeah, the juxtaposition of the industrial sounds as the bass and the sort of almost heroic horns over top, it feels a little bit like a working song or a rowing song, right? Because it is a very structured beat. Mm-hmm. I started thinking about the dwarves in Snow White, also their working song as they go home. But it's almost an invasion of that space by our heroes, or maybe even an acknowledgement of the espers, who are the human or Asperian element that exists here also.
You're hitting all the right points that I was going to bring up if someone else hadn't already. We've got this kind of two things happening at the same time. One is this heavy industry sense, which makes sense because we're in this place that we haven't really gotten a good semblance of at this point in the game. And so we have a massive tonal shift where it's like, whoa, we're in this massive literal factory where they're doing some pretty heinous stuff. But at the same time, the term Ira used for the strings and the trumpets was heroic. And the word that I would use to even further elaborate on that would be grandiose, where it sounds like here's this big, all of our machinations we've been working on for years and years as the Empire, as Gestalt and Kefka and all them, they're finally coming together. And it's almost like the moment in The Lion King when Scar kind of comes to power and there's this big be prepared sort of thing. And that song, you could argue, sounds very grandiose, very grandeur, and heroic, because in his eyes, he's finally ascending to that point where he is the hero of his own story. Well, in this sense here, Kefka and Gestalt and all them, they're the heroes of their own story, obviously, as well. And so we get these two counteracting ideas here of heavy industry, heavy synth sounds, heavy metal sounds, combined with what could be by itself a very beautiful, not fanfare quite, but like an overture setting to be like, here's the glory of Kefka's empire. And of course, we as the listener, as the gamer, we know that that's not quite right. That's not quite jiving with our perspective as the protagonist, right?
Right. Uematsu loves doing this trick, and I love listening to him do it. He does it in Kefka's theme, as you mentioned. He does it in a lot of his battle music, where it's the A section is the monster's going to get you, the monster's going to get you. And then the B section is but we're the heroes and we win the day with big trumpets. One of my favorites, though, is in the Genova piece that I'm sure we'll break down at some point, right? But Genova spends most of its time going da 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 da, and then there's this great moment of ba 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 da, and it's a timer version of one of these. So he loves that trick. I love it too. He knows how to. He always wants to remind you that our heroes are there, and that hope and love and all that Final Fantasy ooey gooey nonsense is it's always there.
If I can sneak in a Rush reference, my favorite band of all time, listen to 2112, the A side to the album 2112. It's a 7-piece long or 7-movement long song called 2112, and the priests of Syrinx are in a very similar position as Kefka's empire here, where they're telling you as the listener, what's the line? We've taken care of everything, the words you read and the songs you sing, the pictures that give pleasure to your eye, where it's like, hey, don't worry about anything, we've got it covered. And there's a very similar sense between something like 2112 and what Kefka and his crew are doing here. But on the other side, going farther, there's something that the synth part does in the background here that's really it's a clever nod to setting up where we are in a way that I'm guessing most people would never actually realize what's happening. Drew, can you play the selection again real quick? And I'm going to focus on primarily the part where I'll put my hand up on the webcam when we get there, and you can just listen to it for a few seconds. I'm pretty sure it's pretty early in the clip. So
little
what is that
synth thing that
yeah, in a musical sense, can you guys tell what that is, what they're actually playing there?
Nope.
It's just octaves. It's I don't know the exact note. I think it's a B flat or a G sharp or something, but it's basically just it's this thing where there's these jumping octaves that go sometimes in a 2-octave leap, which is something that is incredibly unnatural in any regular performance from a singer primarily, or like a regular instrument. If you listen to like bird calls, they will never do these weird octave leaps that then go down. If you listen to a singer, another song that I didn't give a link here because I'm sure we would get copyright strike, but if you listen to the Diva's aria from Fifth Element, she sings these parts that are really like unearthly because she's seeing these massive gaps in a very tight time frame. And so when we hear these things that are these weird octave leaps, it's just putting your brain in the sense of like something's not natural here. There's something synthetic about what's happening because people don't just sing that way and no instrument is just played that way naturally. It would only in this sense come from something where there's like an actual electronic, or Magitek in this case, process happening in the background, and the byproduct of that process is these weird octave leaps going up and then going down. And before we hear those octaves, there's this weird like kind of like a whooshing air sound. So it makes you think like there's something getting like sucked up into a pipe, or there's something getting pulled out of something else, which if you see the story with the espers, that's pretty spot on for some things that they're doing with the espers in the actual lab area. But with just this little thing that you guys might not have even noticed, it's further like moving you into this weird realm of synthesis, synthetic materials, industry. And at the same time, we have also a hint to Kefka's theme in the bass part. Did you guys catch that at all?
Yes. I mean, I've often thought that because it's the bum bum bum, but it's almost bum 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 beat.
Yeah, we start off with almost the same tempo, where in this case it's and that's the same tempo as. And wouldn't you know it, in the very first bar, they play that ascending minor scale and then allude to the raised seventh below it later. So if you hear these two parts back to back, you can tell that this and this sound really, really similar. Yeah. So even though he didn't quote Kefka's theme directly, you can listen to it and go, oh, Kefka's around. He's here somewhere. I can't tell where he is, but he's here somewhere.
That's one of the reasons why I've always preferred the translation or title Devil's Lab. I really like that. I know that it's much more common now for it to be called Magitek Research Facility. And there's an interesting history behind Final Fantasy's use of that word, Magitek, as well. But I like the one that invokes Kefka and calls him the devil, which is not something that I think they ever even say in game. I don't know. It's like this extra added twist. Like this is where the devil gets up to his devilishly machinations, right?
Definitely. It's a great combination, like we keep saying, of evil, industrial, synthetic. You can think of like Fern Gully type stuff going on here, where the bad guys are the ones that are taking over all the industry and whatnot, compared with, you know, the heroes of the theme, or the heroes of the story, plus the quote unquote grandeur or heroism of Kefka. He himself, in our eyes, is not the hero, but for him, Gestalt, all them, they are the heroes of this story. And he combines those two things really well, while you're also kind of like stuck in this location. So you're just overwhelmed all around you on all sides by the visuals, by the monsters you fight here, by the sound, by the, you know, heroic sweeping melodies and the strings that come in halfway through. It's just great. It's a piece you only hear here in this game, but it fits. Like it just fits. It just fits. It's so good.
It's so good. It's so good. I did mention earlier that, you know, you're not going to hear this on Prey or Celtic Moon or any of that, like the specialty. When you go to Distant Worlds, you don't expect to hear them play. How cool. I mean, come on. So find a way.
So when you go to one of these concerts, look at the percussion and see if there's an anvil back there. Right?
Yeah.
That'll be the clue.
Double check. But I did want to play a cover of it from one of my favorite YouTube musicians who've allowed us to use their music on YouTube with some of our videos. I haven't used a lot of it because, as you'll hear, some of it gets pretty loud, and we tend to play it in the background here. But I think it really Ryan was just talking about, all of those elements, and really the sound of, the devil at work, as it were. They're called Twinstrumental. Love these guys. A couple of twins play some guitars and make some big loud noise. I'm going to start us a little bit into the end of the chorus or B section or whatever, as they get into their second loop, because that's where it's going to get real loud. So this is a headphone warning, because it's going to get loud for a second. Yeah, those guys rule.
Guys after my own heart. I love that phaser effect at the start of that on one of the guitar parts. And as a Dream Theater fan, they're summoning some Dream Theater sensibilities with some of those arrangements and tones.
Also, listener, you got to check out that video so you can see the ridiculous beards and wigs and hammer on anvil. Again, you got to do it. It's a big part of the piece.
Cool. Is there anything else you guys had on this one?
No, I think the only other thing that, since we just mentioned the hammer on anvil, and before we get to the floating continent, let's listen to a piece from Final Fantasy VII that is a favorite of mine that uses the hammer on anvil. They do it in a lot of them, but this is one that I absolutely wanted to make sure we talked about. Vibes.
Yeah. This is another great example. What do you guys hear in that hyper programmatic sense of music writing? What do we hear that we would literally hear if we were at the Mako reactor?
There's echoing. There's the sound of, I was thinking of it as a metallic sigh, either metal being pulled across metal or maybe air moving through the pipes.
Yeah, I hear it as like a steam release, like in the beginning when you hear that big, like, I hear it as a steam vent of some kind.
I also feel like the hammer on anvil, which oddly enough is like part of the melody, because they're like bells over the top of it, because we're not mining ore, we're mining crystals or life stream or whatever, right? So it's a little more dingy chimey, right? That's a technical musical.
To use a proper term, dingy chimey. Yeah, there's tubular bells or chimes you can hear. Bong, 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 bong.
Yeah.
Which could also be programmatic. If we need to get a hold of the workforce, we might ring a chime first and then our announcements come over the PA.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's also something in like when there's that part where in the background there's those little upbeat synth sounds that are like bleep, bleep, whoop, whoop. If I play on my keyboard here trying to kind of emulate, it sounds kind of like this. Where it's got this little like upbeat, kind of scoop to each one. And if you listen in Final Fantasy VII, which this is what this game is, or the game this is from, by the way, if you listen in Final Fantasy VII, when you hit some of the little like elevator button type things and like control panel type things, they have a very similar like boom kind of sound of like this little wah thing being activated. Yeah. So yet again, he's putting that sound of like literally pressing buttons into the music itself.
It's so cool. And I feel like it has a similar synthesizer element going on too, that like we just heard in the Magitek Research Facility, right? Where when that comes in and it's giving you, but especially that juxtaposition of those sounds that you're saying sound like they come from inside the room, and then these synthesizers that it's like, well, that's for us, the listener, that's to put us more in like inside not inside the room, but inside the mindset, right? And so he's doing both. He's putting us both inside the room and inside the minds of the people who would be there, whether it's our characters or the people who work there. Sometimes both, because again, he's a genius. So. Yeah.
So someday I want to do a little like an experiment where I put completely wrong music and like overlay it onto something like the Mako reactor, mission at the start, right. Or something like the waltz scene from Final Fantasy VIII or something, and just show people like this is how different and how wrong it looks when you have the wrong kind of music setting up the scene. But again, Uematsu's a genius. He's doing multiple things at once, like Drew just said, in a really, really good way.
All right, for our next piece, The Floating Continent, also from Final Fantasy VI. Like I said earlier, I'm going to play for us the first bit of it, and then I'm going to cut it off before it gets to... This first bit is close to a minute, like 50 seconds or something. The second bit's not as long, but it's so full of weird stuff that I had to set it aside for us to listen to on its own. So this is sort of the main Floating Continent theme, the first bit that we're going to listen to here.
And set the scene for us, because for those of us who haven't played 6 in a while, we just had the Devil's Lab, Magitek Research Facility, where they're basically mining espers, is the simplest way to describe it. What's happening in the Floating Continent?
Ira.
So... our heroes fail a lot in this game. Spoilers. And one of the things we have failed to do here is prevent the bad guys from taking a chunk of land out of the ground and just putting it in the sky. And they're going to try to use that to then channel the powers of the gods, such as they are in this world. And so one of my things when we were talking about which songs we want to talk about, which pieces we want to talk about, was we should get a weird one in, because Liberia Fatale is weird in its way, but it's not weird in the way that Uematsu can really get, like with the moon on 4 or this one here in 6. There are alien worlds, alien landscapes that our heroes go to. And sometimes to set that scene, we need something that feels musically so much different from what we've already done, even different from, going to the Nazi laboratory that we just dealt with in Kefka's domain.
Yeah, perfect setup.
Good cutoff. I didn't want it to start yet. Yeah.
So already this sounds like we're in the same vein as the Devil's Lab Magitek Facility thing, right? What is telling us immediately, hey, you're kind of in the same part of the game.
Got similar rhythm instruments and synth sounds, right? We've got that kind of driving so it's moving, it's upbeat. They're both, neither one of these. I mentioned the Moon music earlier. Sometimes Uematsu's alien landscapes take you down. These ones are more, this is up, right? Yeah, that the harp, the running harp arpeggios.
Yep, I was hoping someone was going to mention that. What does that sound like?
Well, it's Prelude.
Sounds like we're in the sky.
I think Drew said it.
Prelude. We are in the sky, but I always think Prelude. You hear harp arpeggios, you go, you do Prelude again.
Yeah, and why might, because I don't think, honestly, that Uematsu uses the Prelude harp thing a lot in 6, as much as he did in 5. In 5, he was pretty liberal with it, of putting it in different places. Yeah. But in 6, he only plays it, as far as I can remember, at the beginning, and then here. Why do you think he chose this spot to invoke the Prelude again?
Interesting question. Yeah. I mean, I guess to tie us back to, it sort of goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier, reminding you that the heroes are there. It's like, you're in this weird alien world, but it's still, we've got a chance. We've got a fighting chance. He always wants to give us that. That's my
Irene, got any ideas?
It's a place of magic, and the crystals are so, I tend to associate the Prelude with crystals. Especially in something like 14, where it's like, okay, you want to know what Final Fantasy about? Here's a crystal, and here's a prelude. So that's what it makes me think. Also, we're in the sky.
We're in the sky now. Here's what I would argue. I would argue that this part here is right before the big final. Like if you think of the game as like a proper Act 1, Act 2 structure, we're starting Act 2 right after this area begins. And so the way I always thought of this, with that prelude there and this whole theme and everything, and then the world of ruin happens, is that the first prelude we hear is setting up Terra's story. And then we hear the prelude again here, setting up Kefka's story. And from here till the end, it's now about Kefka and how are we going to stop Kefka? What's he doing to mess up with the world? What's he doing to cause all this chaos and destruction and killing people and everything? And so it's literally a way of saying, hey, a whole new game world, quite literally, is about to take place, and a whole new story arc is about to take place. Here's a prelude. You basically have 2 games for the price of 1.
Yeah. Yeah, he's resetting the game because the game is about to reset itself, right? Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
Pretty much, yeah. And then we also hear the octave synths again. We hear that where it's those really strong octaves. Again, we're in that same sense of some sort of synthetic stuff happening here. We're in the same kind of tempo where it's like almost like a marching tempo, but not like a quick John Philip Sousa 2-step kind of march. It's that more foreboding, heaviness sort of march sound. But then we keep going, and what do we hear next? What is it? What's that sound? What's happening in the game?
Everything is exploding.
I would argue there's something very specific that hasn't happened just yet in the game, but it's like about to happen. That those sounds, the weird like barrel. What does that sound like in the game?
To me, that's the sound when we get when espers are flying around and breaking things. It's the chaos of the magic being re-released into the world.
That's a good lead-in of like,
or
chaos.
Even the statues, right? Once the statues are moved and it's like raining fire down on the world.
It's raining fire. There's something specifically that Kefka starts doing right after this scene.
The Light of Judgment.
Yes. So in the game, for those who don't remember, there's this thing called the Light of Judgment, which is basically the Kefka death ray, where he can just simply go, I don't like this person for whatever reason, and they're annihilated. And he literally just basically sends laser beams from his like throne in the floating continent to kill them.
Right.
Yeah. And so this sounds like a literal laser charging up and then zap, zap. And we're getting a little bit of a taste of that before it actually takes place in the game. You could argue easily, like Ira was just saying, it's the espers flying around. Maybe it's the sound of Kefka like capturing them, because there's some weird things that happen where he's like capturing the espers / absorbing their powers. A lot of chaos stuff happens. But whenever I hear those two notes, it always sounds like he's zapping something with that charge up before it as well.
Oh, yeah. In that scene, he is just sort of laughing and taking out espers, right? So it that's his light of judgment before he gets the big one. It's the little one before the big one. Oh man.
Yeah, and it's kind of got that sound like the first time you played Chrono Trigger and you heard the Lavos cry the first time, and it's like, what is this sound that's coming out of my Super Nintendo? What on earth is this? Yeah. I remember getting the same sense when I first played 6, and I was like, what is this bizarre, like, what is going on here? Because I had no clue what was happening in the game after. I had no spoilers whatsoever, and I was just like, what is happening here? And then the world falls apart, and it's like, oh, that's why it got so intense. Makes sense now.
Yeah. I have a lot of favorite things about this piece. I love how rhythmically interesting it gets, especially there when it's established that bum 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 bum, and then in that B section it starts da 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 ba 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 ba. It reminds me a lot of like the Sorcerer's Apprentice or something like that, like Fantasia. Like the water is filling up and Mickey is trying to scoop more water than buckets, right? It's da, 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 or filling up. I love that rhythmic section. There's one other thing that I want to ask you about in a minute, but we heard right there, one of my favorite things about this piece is that its loop is just a big open bit of space. It just for a moment cuts out because it builds and builds, like I was just saying, like Sorcerer's Apprentice, right? And then there's a big open bit of space, and then rather than looping at the beginning with the harp and that weird sound, I always thought like was the airship landing, like he brings us in on the melody, like the main melody. So there's a big open bit of space, and then oh, it's so cool.
Yeah, the fancy word for that in music is called a grand pause or a caesura, where it's just this big emptiness to create that sense of like anticipation. There's nothingness, and now there's a lot of somethingness happening. It's a clever trick. He doesn't use it a lot in most of his games at the loop point, but of course when it's appropriate. In my eyes, it's kind of like Kefka's recharging his powers after he annihilated something or absorbed one of the espers or something, and then all right, on to the next one, and then he just keeps on going with his little jolly way.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about in this piece is the way the melody never seems to quite resolve where you think it's going to, where you want it to, right? Yeah. I feel like so many times it could have gone da 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 da, or a couple times in the middle. There are so many times it keeps, especially that last one, where it just tumbles down and down and down, and it seems like it almost never resolves, and I love it so much. And I don't know if there's a technical term for that or what it's fully accomplishing here, but that is, I think, a very interesting trick to pull off.
Yeah, this is great because I'm going to get a chance to discuss one of my favorite bands, Dream Theater, twice in one episode. So there's a Dream Theater song called Octavarium that plays a melody kind of like this, and this will reference to Final Fantasy here in a second, but it sounds like this. And we hear something very similar in this song, where it's kind of got that minor third growth going up and down. And this is like an altered scale, basically. There's a bunch of different terms you can use for these that I'm not going to get into right now. But it's basically when you're taking an octave, and instead of dividing it into 7 or 8 different notes, you're doing it so that everything is going to be whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So our normal scale that we would get for something like this, that's your major. It's what would it be, 2 holes and a half, 3 holes and a half. got your minor. Similar structure, just sequenced differently. But this altered mode scale here has an extra note because we're putting more half steps in it. And they're basically making the melody work off of that. And by default, to our Western music brains, we don't hear any sense of resolution in this because there's no typical sense of like a dominant chord going to your tonic chord. It's just this kind of, like you said, tumbling thing where it's like we're going from one tension and dissonance to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and our ears don't know how to handle that. So when you combine that with the actual chord structures, where it's these very tight, very dissonant, dun 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 da 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 da, there's no sense of structure anymore, which makes a lot of sense because in the game, he's literally like fracturing the earth and there's no more structure to the literal like plates of the planet.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. So I've got a question, but I got to preface it. So this piece also has, especially at the beginning, a sort of intrusive heroic theme that I hear. And so it could be that our heroes are invading the floating continent, but as you pointed out, Ryan, this is also at least partially Kefka's story, so it could be his own heroic designs as he sees them. I really like it. I think it's interesting. But one of the things I have noticed throughout my life is that high strings, which I think is what that is meant to emulate,
yes,
put me in mind of the sky or air, but they are not wind instruments. Can you tell me why string instruments remind me of the air when they are not literally wind instruments?
Here's what I would guess. I bet I could do some research on this and give a more proper answer, but my kind of off-the-cuff knee-jerk response is that when you hear these strings, and when you hear most strings in these kind of old MIDI sound fonts from Super Nintendo type stuff, the patch it's being used is a string ensemble. And if I remember correctly, it's like patch 48 and 49, I think, on an old general MIDI subset, but it's string ensemble 1, string ensemble 2. It's not a solo instrument, which actually here, because I got my keyboard set up right here. So here's what a synthetic full string section might sound like. Here's what it sounds like, though, when you have just an individual on, again, this is synthesized on MIDI, what just one violin or viola might sound like. And it's a much more grating kind of sound. And here's my kind of guess of why it sounds like air, floating, flying, something along those lines, is that when you have a lot of strings together, it gives you that immediate sense of like power and motion because there are lots of people playing together. When you hear one violin by itself, it doesn't by itself give you that same sense because it's just one person. Even if you had a full orchestra behind it, but there was like one solo violin going, it wouldn't, in my eyes, in most music, it wouldn't have the same effect as this like big sweeping soaring thing. You want the full effect. It's literally a sense of more people equals more power, and being in the air requires lots of power in some way. You could get into some arguments also about like the harmonic overtones that you get from hearing a full ensemble versus just one instrument. I could certainly go do some research on that kind of stuff, but my instinct is to give you that answer. It's basically the sense of lots of people playing the same thing together versus just one thing. But then to flip that with like a woodwind type thing, woodwinds, I think they have more of a sense of, I guess, like dance-like nature, or very, what's a good word for it? Like a solo clarinet or a solo flute is very piercing and not necessarily as like flowing or sweeping as something that flight might be. But now that being said, if I had like a full clarinet choir, I've heard some beautiful clarinet choirs before where there's like 12 different soprano clarinet parts and 2 sopranino clarinet parts, and those can sound very sweeping and washed and very, powerful, uplifting, in the air, flying. But that's just not something that's typical in a lot of orchestral arrangements. So it might just be also a matter of, because you've heard it a lot, your brain tells you that because of what it was. The whole like ergo hoc, ergo proctor hoc sort of thing.
It is that way because it's always been that way.
Exactly. That's my knee-jerk reaction. I wish I had a better answer, but that's what my brain
I knew it was a weird question, so yeah.
We all learned interesting stuff, whether or not. Anyway, so as I mentioned earlier, not a lot of rearrangements and performances of these at the big concerts and stuff like that. That said, Ryan, did you ever play Stranger of Paradise?
I did not. I watched the trailer like everyone did. I have not played it though.
Okay, first of all, you should. Main character drops F-bombs and he punches monsters in the face, and it's fantastic. Also, it does get quite good, especially at the end. And one of the things that it does is, like, every world that you go to is inspired by a different Final Fantasy, and it reuses a lot of the music, some of them more obviously than others. This one really snuck up on me. Since I'm assuming a lot of people out there haven't played it, I don't want to give too many spoilers. But later into the game, and I'm going to set this up a little bit, just the music of it, because I'm actually going to drop us into this piece about 2.5 minutes in, because it's built very cinematically. It's got a lot of flowy bits, very little drums and bass early on. Has strings that remind me a lot of like the Matrix and stuff. It's supposed to be super ethereal, and it slowly builds this into the background to the point that the first time I went through this, I didn't even notice it for a while. But after about 2.5 minutes of being in a place, I'll put it that way, you hear this.
I heard it.
Yeah. Much to my chagrin, that's basically all it does. And then it wanders on for another 3 minutes or so. But man, I thought that's cool.
Yeah, for the listeners at home, if you didn't catch it, there's the string theme in the Floating Continent song. Da, 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 da. It's played a little slower on like a music box, celeste, glockenspiel type instrument of some kind here. In a very like tasty sort of way. There was definitely like, I know this game was more recent, but there was definitely a time kind of like in the early 2010s, maybe late 2000s, where that sort of sound profile was pretty frequent in video games, where it was like this sort of partially synthy percussion string bed on the bottom, and then these little like floaty glockenspiel music box type sounds going over it. There's one from one of the Dot Hack games. I don't know which one it was, but I can hear one of the songs in my head right now that sounds just like what you just played there.
Cool. Yeah, I was surprised, like I said, even after hearing, because you get used to certain tracks coming back over the years, or that you might hear in Final Fantasy 14 or World of, or these other ones. And I was not expecting the Floating Continent to come back in that way. It did make me wish, like I said, that they'd played more of it very gently. If you listen in there, you can hear the bass line. It's much slower, and it's, I think, mostly on string bass. It's just boom, 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 boom. And it's like, yeah, very clever, very interesting. But it's a piece that I've always thought was sort of randomly incredible in the middle of this game. You know what I mean? Like, what? It's like, what is this piece of just absolute phenomenal orchestration doing just right here?
It is a shame when there are these great pieces that they're either like they're so late in the game or they happen so briefly that people don't really like remember them as well. Terra's theme you remember because it's the little first thing you hear and it comes back later in the game in multiple forms. But things like these two songs here, you only hear them in one place and it's late in the game. So if you don't get that far, you might never even hear these. But they are still fantastic. They're great textbook examples of great programmatic music writing still. So we've got a couple other ones here, and I've listed some mystery game tracks here. And these are all in that same vein of what I'm calling hyper programmatic music, where there's something that literally sounds like the location you would be like while you're listening to the song. They put some sort of usually extra musical type thing or a percussive sound effect of some kind. And if you guys want, we can do this one of two ways. We can either just like play them. You guys can see what the songs are and see what they are like. There's one at the end as well, or whenever you guys want to look at it, of a song that I've done, a cover I did that made it hyper programmatic. Or you guys can look at them and then like Drew, if you want to click the button and then kind of like avert your eyes so you can't see what the actual thing is. I don't know if you've already seen them or not. Or
I've already seen them. Sorry, I had to bring them up on the thing, so now they're all
okay. So if Ira wants to,
there we go,
and he can guess where these are supposed to. Well, I guess the Uematsu ones might not work as well, but the other mystery game track one will.
Okay,
let's just give them a listen. Though, let's just listen to some Uematsu and then some mystery stuff. And then right there at the end, dun dun king, dun dun king.
Like our old friend came back, right?
Yeah. So this is for those who don't know, this is the song "Movin'" from Final Fantasy VIII. And say what?
I said, what a title, "Movin'."
I know, right? There's a lot of those in 8 where it's just called like sorrow or respite. You know, just like these little one-word titles. But "Movin'" is a great one where it literally is like, hey, there's something mechanically in this case moving. And in that second part, we hear basically the same themes, but they incorporate that anvil on metal kind of sound again to give you that industrial type sound. Go to the next one in that list. We'll hear some more hyper programmatic stuff. So I see Ira's got his eyes closed. Do you remember what that's from?
I'm pretty sure it's from Final Fantasy VII. Yes, no?
It is from 7. I'd be shocked if you know the name, because I don't even remember the name of this one until I look at it again every time.
Is it Fort Condor?
Not Fort Condor. It's called Judgment Day, and it's what plays in the northern crater, like as you're going down.
Okay, that's interesting to me, because it does sound to me like a place that would be made by hand, not necessarily made by nature.
Yeah, you'd think so, right? I included this one because it uses that same metallic sound, but I honestly don't know what that's supposed to be in this scenario, because it's basically like the bottom of the life stream in this giant crater. There's no weapons here, like the capital W weapon that's in Final Fantasy VII. I don't know what it's supposed to be. Do you guys know?
I think this is it also sort of evokes that time at the end of 7 when the meteor is hanging over the world, right? And I think it's re-invoking just the beginning of the game, and all of the themes are coming back together. A lot of people like to say, and I don't agree, that Final Fantasy VII drops its sort of capitalism and environmental and anti-capitalist themes in the end for stuff that's more spiritual. I think it ties them all back together, and I think maybe that hammer and anvil coming back is reminding us that a lot of this is tied to the planet's dying, Cloud. The first thing that Barrett says at the beginning, they're down here mining the lifeblood of the earth. And as much as, this has become a cosmic battle between good and evil, and Cloud and Sephiroth, and Alien got involved at some point, there is still, I think, that reminder that we the people, and our need for energy and convenience. We built Shinra. That dude doesn't get to live in the big fancy building and sit in the big fancy chair and maybe destroy the big fancy building without people allowing him to do that. And so I think it's a reminder to us. I got a little intense. Like, why is the hammer and anvil there? Because capitalism. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened there, Ryan.
That's a good take, actually. I hadn't considered that as being more of a callback than hyper programmatic. It's just kind of reminding you of where you've come from throughout the game. Let's go to the next one. That's also the Mystery Uematsu track 3. This is one of my favorite short titles in or short songs in all of his stuff. It only plays, I think, twice in Final Fantasy VIII, if that. And it's a sin that it only plays for like a minute and like in one or two places in the whole game. Ira, do you recall what happens in Final Fantasy VIII when we hear this melody?
Is this when I can't remember if we're trying to prevent it or make it happen, but we're putting together a giant radio tower space laser?
Yeah, it's when you're going to Dalit and they basically repair the radio tower, essentially.
Okay, all right.
The song, for those of you at home, if you want to look it up, it's called Starting Up. And it's literally like you're starting up this giant mechanical thing, right? We hear that really nice heavy metal on metal percussion again. We hear that great little bass line, the crunchy TM term that Drew used earlier, with the trumpets, like the muted trumpets. It's just got this really great like industrial sound, and I hate that we only hear it like once or twice in the whole game, because I love that. It just that could be like a 5-minute long piece, and yet it's wasted. I feel like it's one of the few misses in all of Final Fantasy VIII's soundtrack, is that theme was only used here, and so in such a small way. It just breaks my heart.
There, it's got that tasty bass line that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's so good. On the even more extreme, if you want to look at the one that it's called Mystery Game Track 2. This is going to take it a similar direction we've talked about, where it's kind of part industry, part technology. And there's one thing in particular. It's in the song. It's just sections from 35-second mark to about 1:30, and we're going to hear a lot of stuff that is highly programmatic. What is that song?
I do know it, but I got a joke answer first. This is from The Rock with Nick Cage and Sean Connery.
It is.
It's that same vibe, right? This is from Metal Gear, some version of Metal Gear.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 2.
And it's got that sort of anthemic military anthem aspect to it that you hear, not necessarily with Semper Fi, but with that Top Gun theme. It's got that kind of soaring, we're the heroes and we're doing the right thing, even though a lot of weird stuff going on.
Yeah, and the part of this that I wanted to point out is obviously we have that industrial percussion back, nothing weird there. But there's also some parts where there's in the background, if you've played the game, there's a certain sound that happens when you use the chaff grenades, the things that basically like disable the cameras. And there's a very similar sound that's played in that section we just listened to. Moving on to even more stuff, there's something very like synthetic about that little 2-bar drum break in the middle there.
Yeah.
And part of why it sounds so weird and so like unearthly and unnatural, kind of like the octaves thing we discussed earlier on the synth, is because it sounds like something where there's like a Steam release or there's a crash symbol or China symbol being hit, but it cuts off. It doesn't have the full release where it's just kind of like, it literally is like cut off a split second after it's already begun. So it tells you immediately, it's almost like an old Discman, like skipping, where you would hear little bits and blips of the piece, but it wouldn't quite go normally, which does sound different from something like an old phonograph where the needle skips. It's a very different sound. In this case, it's a highly, digital technological thing that's happening when you hear that cutoff, that splice point in between that weird little drum break there, that I think puts you in the mindset of like, yes, it's espionage. It's kind of this, James Bond in the modern day sort of story, but we are properly in the near future now with the technology you use, with the storyline that goes on, which I will never understand in Metal Gear 2. But yet again,
it's one of my favorite games of all time. I know it's highly controversial and super weird, but That game like changed my brain chemistry.
Right? That was the first Metal Gear I ever played. Was Metal Gear Solid 2.
Oh,
and at
weird.
The end, one of those weird things with like the messages from the Colonel coming over, and he's like, "I need to find a pair of scissors." La li lu lay lo, and there's like this weird real footages of like people walking around. I just remember thinking like, "What is going on in this game?" Like, clearly my PS2 broke, right? Like something's wrong with my disc.
Oh man, it's so weird. I love weird stuff, and it's weird.
It's weird. All right, we got one more on my end here. It's a little bit of me tooting my own horn here, but this is one more in that vein of hyper programmatic music. So, Drew, if you don't mind, go ahead and cue up first. It's called on the bottom of that thing called Mystery Game Track 3. And Ira, this will be a good chance for you because I'm not sure you guys have played the Octopath Traveler games. This is a song from Octopath Traveler 2, fantastic soundtrack. And first, I want Ira to guess what he thinks this might be. Like in the game, what's this music about? And this one itself here does not have any like extra musical, highly programmatic stuff in it. But give it a listen.
Okay, so the two instruments I hear first are what I think of as the tin whistle, and
some kind of penny whistle, tin whistle sort of thing.
Yeah, and almost bagpipe drones.
Yeah, good ear, man. They have that low string part, but the way that they play it in those like grouped octaves and fifths, plus a little bit of like a scoop to it, bum, bum. Yeah. That's what bagpipes sound like when they're starting up. So if you were to guess, what would this kind of music be set to in a game like an RPG?
Yeah, so for much of my middle school and high school and college life, I loved Celtic music, and a lot of that was about marching to war against an empire that is so much bigger when it's not also about the diaspora or enjoying whiskey or heartbreak. So my guess would be this is sounds vaguely like a marching song at the beginning of things when there's still hope.
That's actually not too far off. It's the sound, or it's the music that plays in one of the starting villages for one of the 8 characters in Octopath Traveler 2. It's for Agnia, the dancer. It's like her hometown of sorts. And I wouldn't say there's quite the same sense of like the march toward war sort of thing. It's literally she's a dancer, and this is kind of setting up her as like the Riverdance style character. And it's very much a pseudo Celtic village that she's born in, and then she quickly leaves the village to go off on her adventures and everything. But on my last album, Travelers, I did a cover of this song, and I'm not going to say a word about it. I'm going to have you guys listen to the first. I'll put my hand up when it's about to like loop, and I've kind of hit the point. It starts very soft, but I want you guys to listen to the hyper programmatic stuff that I did on my take of this song, and let me know what you think is happening in the quote-unquote story that I put it to. Oh, by the way, the song is called A Verdant Wind Blows, for those of you at home. So what do you think the story is? What's happening here?
Yeah.
Ira, you go first, because I actually have played only one very small segment of either Octopath Traveler game, and it happens to be Agnes's beginning. So I would like you to go first.
Yeah, this sounds to me like we're in a kitchen or a pub. My wife and I got to spend a couple weeks in Ireland this summer. And every once in a while, you'll go into a bar and there'll just be a jam band. And they'll be going. And they'll stop and they'll chat and they'll laugh. And, someone will leave and someone else will join. Or it might be in the place across the street. And so you can hear the sounds of the people doing whatever they're doing also as the folks get together and tune their instruments and get going.
Spot on. Drew, do you have more to say?
I do. Did I get her name right, by the way? I feel like I said the wrong name. I said Agnes.
Yeah, it's Agnia, I think. Yeah, okay. Agnes, close.
Like I said, I only played this once. But when I did, I was very struck by it. It brought me back to, she has this relationship with her father. And her father is there in the room cooking or doing something. And that's what I immediately thought of. And it reminded me very much when I played it of Chrono Trigger, and the beginning of that with waking up and mom is there, right? And so this, and then the other thing it brought me to was my early days of making music, and in fact, my first kind of CD that I put together with my friends started out with us banging around on our instruments in the garage, right? And so you actually put me in several different places in time. You invoked Chrono Trigger from my childhood, which is what Octopath was doing in the first place. But then you reminded me of her and her father and this very sweet, she's not just setting out on her journey. It's going to be a self-discovery, and it's leaving home and learning to play music. And so then you've got someone just picking up a guitar or just clanging together and starting out and fumbling the first couple of times, because you don't start out perfect with the guitar, and you don't start out perfect on a journey, right, on an adventure, and certainly in self-discovery. And so you've brought all these things together, and it's like, yeah, you're sitting on the floor making music. Maybe one or two of you, maybe a brother and a sister, are making music while mom or dad is cooking in the other room, because that is how we're going to begin at home, and then we are going to set out on our adventure.
Yeah, you're both hitting all the big points. Basically, what I did with the album Travelers was, it's a concept album where it's kind of tells a rough hero's journey story through video game music from front to back. And in the hero's journey, the actual like Joseph Campbell codified version of it, there's usually a point where like the hero is succeeding, and then something bad happens about halfway through. And that's also happens in the story that I'm kind of quote unquote telling in the album Travelers. And so basically this is at the low point where the travelers are kind of like, oh, we're lost now. What's going to happen? And so it's supposed to sound like you are basically by yourselves in a tavern, but other people come and join you, like Ira was saying. So the first things you hear, it's literally, if you're curious at home, it's me frying a banana, because it got the best kind of Foley sounds on my recording. And then I was like cooking like macaroni and cheese, and I just recorded just whatever was happening in the kitchen when I was literally cooking a couple, random things to make some sounds. And like Drew just said, it starts off with the guitar player kind of like noodling a little bit, trying to like maybe like remember how a song goes, or maybe like write a song or something, but it's not really like they're performing. It's very quiet with all the tavern sounds. And then they go, oh, okay, here's how the song actually goes. And then they play a little more confidently, like they're maybe performing. Da 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 da. And then they play the second time through, and someone else joins them, which if you've ever been to an old Irish pub, this, like Ira was just saying, is very, very common, where they'll have like a pipe player, or you'll have a bodhrán player, that was me playing an actual bodhrán as the drum player there. A drummer suddenly shows up and they go, oh, I'll play along with you. And you hear the guitarist kind of like stutter for a second, like, oh, whoa, oh, someone else is joining me. I didn't expect that. You hear a squeaking of a chair getting pulled up, and then you hear the drummer kind of count in the guitar player. And so without saying a word, I was able to basically transport you guys successfully, if I might add, into a different place where you could immediately go, I know what's going on here. I know what the environment is. I know what's happening. And I can relate this to a real world thing using a combination of musical concepts and those hyper programmatic things like the sound of a kitchen, the sound of a chair squeaking. And if you listen to the whole entire thing, it basically just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, like you frequently would hear in a tavern bar song sort of thing. And I literally had parts where I recorded like a boot against a cutting board to get the sound of like people stomping their feet in a tavern. Whoa. I was very lucky in college. I actually, close to campus, we had Patrick's Irish Pub. And so we had people at a music college of all things, who were pipe players, who were, concertina players and whatnot. And they'd bring instruments on Friday nights and play at the pub. And I was very fortunate to be a part of those frequently. So when I wrote this version, like Ira was just saying, if you go to a place in Ireland and you go to a pub, that's a real thing that still happens. It's not just some, Hollywood showbiz type thing. And I'm so glad that you guys got that from the way that I wrote it. That's awesome. Listen to the whole thing sometime. I'm actually really proud of that one.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That was awesome. I'm glad we got to listen.
Cool. Anything else on our hyper programmatic Devil's Lab music to get us back to what we started with?
I guess I just want to say it one last time. I love his crunchy tunes. I love it when Uematsu gets weird. I love it when Final Fantasy does it too, right? He has to mirror the stories that are going to every once in a while take you somewhere else, throw you for a left turn, take you to the moon, do time compression. It's like, okay, well, you better have a composer who can, when you walk into his office and say, write me an opera, can just do that. So you say, what does a floating continent sound like? What does it sound like when the devil is at work in his research technology lab? And Uematsu comes out of his lab and he says, well, boss, sounds like this. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and thank you to everyone who has reached out to us. Feel free to let us know what we missed, got wrong, or should have mentioned, plus any questions you may have or any piece you would like to hear in the future down in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to Everything is Final Fantasy on Patreon, YouTube, and all social media platforms, most especially Blue Sky, and please do the same for Airship Overdrive, Ryan's project, where you can hear arrangements of some of your favorite video game music. Join us next time when we trek through the overworlds of Final Fantasies 7, 8, and 9.